Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I will be talking about most of Denis Villeneuve's films and giving you my ranking of them. Of course, this is my list, and it is most particular to my tastes, so feel free to share your rankings in the comments below. Make sure to give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. I would also like to shout out my Christopher Nolan ranking video and my Dune Part 2 reviews. I want to thank you all for giving those videos more attention than I ever thought they would get, and I appreciate it a lot. Thank you. So, Denis Villeneuve is my second favorite director and has a real shot at toppling Christopher Nolan as my current favorite. Pretty much all of his films post-2010 are just fantastic. I unfortunately have not seen two of his movies, Maelstrom and August 32nd on Earth. Those are films that I just have not had the opportunity to watch yet. But with that being said, I have seen 9 of his movies, and then I feel like I have some interesting insight and opinions to share on them. In last place is the 2014 film Enemy. I think this film is quite good. It is very cerebral and it makes you think a lot, but it can be a bit confusing. So with that being said, this is really the only movie by Villeneuve that doesn't fully fire on all cylinders for me. As I just said, it is extremely confusing on the first watch, and it can be off-putting in many ways, even on a rewatch. Though in general, I tend to prefer more straightforward narratives that don't really need me to put together threads like a math calculation, but I can enjoy them on occasion. Maybe that makes me sound like a bit of a hypocrite because I really like Christopher Nolan's Tenet, so I guess take my opinion here with a bit of a grain of salt and take it as you will, I suppose. Though Jake Gyllenhaal is my favorite actor, and he absolutely crushes both of his roles in this movie. And the film also has some very striking and interesting imagery, just like pretty much all of Villeneuve's films. In 8th place is a film called Polytechnique. This is a very tough film to watch due to its subject matter. It covers the events of a horrific mass shooting on a Montreal college campus, and I think that Denis Villeneuve shows off a lot of his talent regarding filmmaking here, where he manages to make the film very visually interesting and have a lot of unique cinematography, but he also shows an immense amount of respect to the real-life victims by showing these events in a way that is as horrific as possible. The motivations of this shooter are chilling, and unfortunately stuff like this still occurs to this day, and I hate it so much. While the subject matter and filmmaking here do show great talent and respect, I also can feel like the movie is very short, while also stretching out some character plotlines a bit too much, so even though the film is short, it can feel longer than it actually is. Though I have to say, overall, Polytechnique is a great precursor to some of the incredible stuff that Denis Villeneuve would do later on in his career. My 7th place is a very tough one for me to place, because I consider it to be a masterpiece of science fiction, and that is Arrival. From here on out, this ranking is very hard to place each individual film, because I love all of these films dearly, and it just so happens that Arrival unfortunately lands at the bottom of the films that I adore. Arrival displays some fascinating and rather unique themes of humanity and how language can shape our thinking. Typically, good science fiction tends to explore a wide range of topics, but at the core of sci-fi is at least exploring some part of the human condition, and for the most part, all of Villeneuve's science fiction movies do that incredibly well. Arrival handles an alien invasion, for lack of a better term, in a different way than I've ever seen. It delves into the complex nature of language at the very basic levels. It really boggles my mind how these characters are even able to figure out how to communicate with the aliens, but that's probably me just being dumb. One of the most interesting questions that this movie asks that I particularly find interesting is, should you go through with something even if it ends in tragedy? I suppose this is more of a subplot question with Amy Adams' character's visions, but it is a question that resonates with me specifically. I won't spoil what this question pertains to, but I think that the answer that this film gives is a resounding yes. Some things end in tragedy and sadness, but it does not mean that the journey towards the end can't be beautiful. And that is just one of the questions that this movie asks. It asks so many more interesting things about humanity, and from a technical point of view, Arrival has stunning visuals and a terrific score from Johan Johansson. In 6th place is a film called Incendie. Incendie is one of Villeneuve's French-Canadian films, and it explores an incredibly engaging story that shook me to my core the first time I watched it. I'm going to avoid spoiling any aspect of this film because not knowing anything about it provides the best possible viewing experience. This movie explores a lot about how war and violence shape our lives and our surroundings, and similarly how love and hate shape the lives of people. It explores trauma in a brutal way, both in subtly directed moments and in hyper-violent ways, like in the bus scene. And again, I won't spoil anything about the movie, so I won't go further into details about Incendie, but it is an experience that is 100% worth watching. However, it is not for the faint of heart. In fifth place is Sicario. Sicario is a film that explores a simple story and simple themes of war and dehumanization. The simple story and simple themes are elevated by Villeneuve's amazing sense of filmmaking and pace. The direction here elevates all of the suspenseful moments throughout the story and really brings the thematic elements regarding violence to the forefront and make them genuinely insightful. This is a film about a highly moral FBI agent being assigned to aid in a part of the war on drugs. Emily Blunt is phenomenal, like usual, as the character Kate. Her character goes through a brutal journey of learning the harshness and gray morality of the drug war. Josh Brolin is also excellent as the CIA agent heading the current mission, and just based on this character's wardrobe choices and personality, he clearly plays very loose with the law and morality. The conflict between Blunt and Brolin creates a terrific dynamic between these two protagonists, and then there is Benicio del Toro's character, who is a very subtle person and takes nearly the entire runtime to fully understand this person's motivations. I think it's one of Del Toro's best performances, and it leads to a chilling climax. The action sequences, I suppose, even though they're not particularly action-heavy, are superbly directed as well. They have a ton of suspense. Everything about this movie is great because of the direction, performances, tension, and also because of Roger Deakins' amazing cinematography. In fourth place is Blade Runner 2049. This movie only being at number 4 is also painful. Villeneuve is a director that has made numerous masterpieces, and I would say that all of the top 4 in this list rank somewhere in my top 50 favorite movies of all time. I like the original Blade Runner enough. I think it is a tad bit overrated, but it is a quite solid movie. Granted, I've only seen it once, so maybe if I rewatch it I would love it more. That being said, I think Blade Runner 2049 is a better movie in just about every way. Maybe that is film bro blasphemy to say, but it is what I think. It is a very long movie and can move slowly at times, but nearly everything about it feels purposeful to the story. Personally, I feel that 2049 tells a much more interesting story than the original film. In a way, it is kind of a mystery movie, which tends to keep me more engaged. This movie also has a lot of interesting explorations of humanity, like Villeneuve's other science fiction films. What does it mean to be human is a broad question, and I think that 2049 gives a lot of interesting possible answers to it. It is also particularly interesting with how it explores these questions and themes because the lead character is a replicant. Ryan Gosling gives a terrific, yet subtle performance as Kay, where Kay is a cop who is trying to discover his purpose beyond just doing his job. And while Harrison Ford doesn't get much screen time, he gives one of his best performances of the last, say, 10-15 years. But at the end of the day, Blade Runner 2049's real star is Roger Deakins. Blade Runner 2049 might just be the most beautiful looking movie that I've ever seen. Nearly every frame is a painting and could be put up on a wall as a piece of art. It is gorgeous. In third place is Dune, Part 1. So naturally, I was very excited to see Villeneuve's next movie after becoming a big fan, and I was thoroughly blown away when I finally saw it. We've seen epic scale and great sci-fi before, but not really like this. Both of the Dune movies have such unique aesthetics and a scale that truly differentiates themselves from any other epics of the last 20 years except for maybe Lord of the Rings. I loved the grand world building that this film sets up, and I still love it. Some of my favorite moments throughout the film are the quiet moments and parts where the scenery is allowed to breathe. And of course, the story that is told in Dune Part 1 is also fantastic. It is, at the end of the day, a tragedy of a family stuck between a rock and a hard place. They knew they were screwed the moment they were forced to go to Arrakis, but they thought they would have had much more time to prepare, and Villeneuve portrays this tragedy expertly. The final moments with Duke Leto are filled with sorrow on all fronts, from Oscar Isaac's performance to Hans Zimmer's amazing music. It also portrays the beginnings of Paul Atreides finding his place in this world. He starts off as a more passive protagonist, observing things and learning about his situation, to becoming an active character who is forced to make quick decisions once the Harkonnens attack. And for me personally, I feel that this movie picked the perfect ending point for this part of the story. I have since read the book, I loved it, and it makes me appreciate the movie more, so I don't really know where else they could have ended Part 1. One thing I will say is that I don't understand the criticism that this movie is slow or that nothing happened. This film is meticulously paced for sure, but I wouldn't say that it's slow, and it does have plenty of action. Once the spice harvester scene with the sandworm happens, the film kicks into high gear and doesn't really relent for the entire second half of the film. And Part 1 is also made even better by Part 2, but I will talk about that in a bit. My number 2 spot is Prisoners. For the longest time, this was my favorite of Villeneuve's filmography. It was really the movie that kicked off it. It uses a recurring theme of a maze to show where the characters are at mentally as they try and find their way out. There are the literal prisoners of the 2 kidnapped girls and Paul Dano's character, and there are the figurative prisoners who deal with their own issues throughout the story. And the performances all around are stunning. How Hugh Jackman or Jake Gyllenhaal weren't even nominated for awards is beyond me. Hugh Jackman's character is a person who is shown to prepare for every possible situation, so naturally the film throws him into the one situation where he could not have possibly prepared for. In a way, this causes the character to become a prisoner to his own anger. Gyllenhaal's character is a person who is a perfectionist and becomes a prisoner to that perfectionism where he can't figure out this case. I could talk a lot more about the symbolism and characters, but I don't really want this part to go on for too long, so I'll stop there. Prisoners is a highly disturbing film that for some reason I am drawn to rewatch quite often. Say what you will about my character, I don't know. With all that being said, my number 1 favorite Denis Villeneuve film is his most recent movie, Dune Part 2. You can get some of my more in-depth thoughts on this movie in my recent review, so I recommend that you go watch that video as well. I have seen Dune Part 2 a second time since that video was posted, and I will probably see it again by the time this video comes out. Dune Part 2 is simply one of the best movies that I've ever seen in my life. I have never seen anything like it. The scale of everything that is going on is unbelievable. And of course, without Part 1, this movie wouldn't be as good as it is, and it also retroactively makes Part 1 even better. Dune Part 2 takes everything that was awesome about Dune and elevates it beyond what I was thought possible. The themes are beautifully explored in so many ways: religion, messianic figures, and really any centralized figure with more power than necessary are the forefront of Frank Herbert's novel, and Villeneuve truly understands that that part of the story is important. The action sequences bring incredible thrills and intensity to the story, and are actually quite frequent, so even the people who think Part 1 is boring might enjoy this one a lot more as well. The theatrical experience of Dune Part 2 is a once-in-a-lifetime type feeling. I walked out of the theater completely stunned and unable to give my thoughts in any coherent way, and I was like that again after a second time. It is so immersive and impactful from a world-building and character point of view that I can't get enough of it. You know how some people had that post-Avatar Pandora depression, where they just wanted to keep going to see it again? That's me with Dune Part 2. And I've been listening to Hans Zimmer's score on repeat. It is simply one of the best theatrical movie scores that I've ever heard. Greg Fraser's cinematography. Need I say anything more there? In conclusion, Dune Part 2 is the cinematic equivalent of Spice, and I am addicted. Thank you all for watching this video. Feel free to give your own ranking of Denis Villeneuve's films. They're all great, so I don't expect anyone's list to match mine perfectly. And remember to give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. Okay, bye.
If it is to be said, so it is.